So I had a breakthrough in my content business when I figured out how to properly do email sequences. So I'd read all this stuff online. Here's the magic funnel to make you billions of dollars. But I didn't really understand what made a good funnel and the different types of funnels. So I wanted to do this video, and this one's going to be probably a bit more teachy than usual. We're going to actually talk about the different funnel structures and why within Course Catalyst, I actually split out email sequences into 3 distinct types. So one of my core beliefs is simplicity wins. And if you go to these other email platforms, they'll just have one sequence builder. So you pretty much just have a sequence, which, by the way, a sequence is just multiple emails chained together in some way, maybe one day at a time, over a number of days. But there are a variety of different sequences, and if I believe simplicity is key, why would I want to introduce multiple variations of this? So now we have 3 different sequence types. Doesn't this make things more complicated? Well, the answer I believe is no, and let me explain why. I actually spent multiple days just thinking through how I would structure sequences for Course Catalyst so I could provide the best sequencing structure for creators, coaches, or any online businesses. And I started here. I was like, let's create the best sequence builder, better than anything out there. But the problem is when you try to cram everything in this one category, you end up with this very general sequence builder. And what I mean by that is it's a builder that can be used to build any type of sequence, but that gives you a bunch of different options and a bunch of extra stuff you have to do outside of the sequence builder to create the type of funnel you want. So for example, if you wanted to have a limited time sale, you're going to have to do a bunch of extra work to create those coupons, structure and time everything properly within that sequence, and you end up with a bloated builder and a complex funnel. So I decided, let's just figure out what goals people have with sequences, and then we can categorize those to customize the display. That's going to help you get the best results the fastest, right? Because you just say what your goal is, and then you get the proper sequence structure. So the 3 different types, yes, it's a decision you make up front, but ultimately this leads to simplicity in actually building those funnels, which is what you need to take all the complex marketing stuff people talk about online and convert it into an actually easy to use and easy to understand sequence. And this transformation is going to change the way people do sequences. While the end goal might be the same, sell some product, upsell to some coaching program, whatever it might be, if you're building sequences with certain goals in mind, and those goals are built in natively in the platform, you're going to get a better experience and you're going to get better results. Because the very first thing is we can reduce issues with sending emails at the wrong time to the wrong people with the incorrect links, or any of the common issues you often see with email marketing. Additionally, we want to bridge the gap between email and products. So if we know we have a goal related to certain products, we can customize the experience so you can create the sequences much easier and see that everything is going to work correctly. So when you're building out a marketing campaign, the emails you send in a sequence are going to be one of 3 possible types. So we can have a drip sequence. And this is kind of the standard, it's the default. This is the equivalent of what you'll see in other email builders. So if you're on some email newsletter platform, you go to create a sequence, that's what the equivalent in Course Catalyst is, a general sequence builder that you can do whatever you want with it. So you can use this to create all the other possible funnels, but we have some specialized variations for certain goals. We have campaigns, and what defines a campaign is that the campaign is tied to some event or a deadline that is happening at the same time for everybody. So if you have some launch, some live event, some sale is ending, that would be a campaign. This is the structure I would pick if I was going to do a Black Friday sale or if I wanted to launch some new course or some new coaching program. The other variation of this is a deadline. Very similar in nature to a campaign, but the difference here is it's tied to the user. It's a relative deadline to some event. So an example is, let's say you make a purchase and we give them a limited opportunity to upgrade to a more comprehensive program. This upgrade is tied to a time So we don't want this offer here to be available to them forever, but it's not a time on the calendar. It's relative to when that person made the purchase. So this might be, for example, 5 days from that purchase. So all of the funnels I've used on other platforms to create this experience was very difficult, and I had to resort to external software. I'm going to actually do a dedicated lesson on how I design deadline funnels to be a native experience within Course Catalyst, giving the recipient, the prospect or customer, the best experience possible. Essentially, to wrap up this idea, anytime you're structuring some marketing material, it's going to fit in one of these 3 categories. So let's talk about which one of these you should choose in what scenarios. So let's first talk about drip sequences. Some common use cases would be onboarding. If you've ever signed up for some product or some software or program, they may send you a couple of emails to talk about how to use it. So we'll do onboarding or program overviews. And this is a great way to give people the most likely chance to succeed with your product when they buy. You're giving them resources and you're engaging them so that they come back to the product, continue to use it, and know how to use it. Next up, we have email courses, something people love. I don't really know why though. I find reading emails to be rather boring, but they are an extremely effective tool for teaching people things and selling people things, which is why it's such a huge priority with my marketing structures and within Course Catalyst. So this could be a great thing to sell, but most likely it's going to be like a lead magnet of some sort. So a 5-day email course on whatever it is you specialize in. When they get that email course, you could then continue to work on them to upsell them into some other product. You can use drip sequences for purge sequences or win backs. So you might have active members and you might have inactive members, or in other platforms you might hear warm and cold. The idea here is you don't want to always be blasting people who are not opening your emails because it's going to hurt your open rates and potentially your overall deliverability. So a very common thing is a purge sequence. After some period of time, you send them an email. Hey, if you want to stay in the email sequence, you can click this link. We would love to keep you and continue to send you emails. Now, many people will reply to this and say, I've been opening the emails, but not all email platforms will track opens because they'll block images. So we can get into the details of that, but basically using some way to re-engage the person. However, within Course Catalyst, my belief is fundamentally different. So we don't have the idea of cold subscribers we're purging. We just have inactive members that we want to win back. Very similar idea, but we don't want to be purging emails that are associated with accounts for products we've given out or have sold. So our filtering of when we recommend sending and not sending is a little bit different. Basically, we would just recommend blasting to the active members and continually re-engage anybody who's inactive to bring them back into the active category. Anybody who goes inactive, you don't necessarily have to purge them because they're not going to hurt your deliverability or your open rates, since in that case, you wouldn't be sending to them. These are great for long-term engagements. So this can keep somebody engaged over time or check in with how they're doing. So you might have something at 30 days, 60 days, or 90 days. You know, maybe you want to check if they want to continue their subscription or warm them up before their bill is coming up soon. And you could also have anything like testimonials and stuff like that. Having this kind of stuff can be a great way to prevent having to do this last resort system here. So you can tell these are pretty much all the same. You have some event, maybe they join the newsletter or download something, and we just have these checkpoints. Maybe it's every day, maybe it's every week, maybe it's every 30 days, whatever it might be. It's a sequence that starts at some point and goes forward. Now, as I mentioned, this could be used for any general email sequences. So pretty much anything that doesn't fit into the 2 specialized categories we're going to get to next, you can create with a standard drip sequence. So you still could do deadlines and launches and anything of that nature within a drip sequence. You're just going to miss out on some of those specializations built into the native Course Catalyst platform. Now let's talk about the specializations and what you should know about them. So we have campaigns and then we have deadlines. Very similar in idea, but there are a couple of key differences. You should think of a campaign as something that's tied to a calendar event, and it's the same for everybody in that sequence. So structurally, these are non-reusable. You could obviously clone it and reuse it. But this is specialized to be a one-time event where you can tie things into, like, say, 5 days before the event or whatever it might be. This is something where everyone is added at the same time. And the other big thing is if you get added in the middle of the campaign, let's say it's a 10-day campaign and you get added in 5 days before the campaign ends, you would be added in the middle. Basically, you would get the email saying the event happens in 5 days, don't miss your spot. If you were added in the middle, you would instead be inserted at the appropriate time so that the deadline lines up the same for everybody. Deadlines are ongoing. You can think of these as evergreen funnels, but with the magic of true urgency. So we add in timers, custom to the contact. So similar to a campaign, but that campaign is relative to the person. The major difference here is it is reusable, it's ongoing. We're not going to have to end it and then create a new campaign. We would just have a deadline that continues to run. The other major difference is people are added randomly, not all together. And by randomly, I mean tied to some event. You know, maybe they make a purchase, or maybe they get a free lead magnet, or they just join your platform in general, and we want to give them a deadline funnel. So you can basically just think of this as a campaign and this as an evergreen campaign, but I specifically am calling out the deadline here because it's going to be a major component to introduce urgency, getting the person to buy before their timer runs out. You don't have to use that timer necessarily, but then it's basically just a regular drip campaign. You don't need the specializations of the deadline campaign. So I actually think the deadlines being built in natively in Course Catalyst is crazy because it's going to open up so many possibilities. We don't have to use an external software. It's actually built into the Course Catalyst backend. So we could show things like the pending offers in the customer's library. We could customize the coupon discounts on certain people. Like, there's endless possibilities. Not all of those features are built right now, but basically the core deadline capability is there. And it gives me the infrastructure to do any of the customizations on the back end. Not something that's easy to do if you have to use some external software to enforce deadlines on a regular drip campaign. So I've been using deadline funnels recently for my products. So basically you have a free lead magnet. This will then enter into a fundamentals course where they have 6 days or something to make that purchase. And then for any purchase, so even other products, we will have an upsell into my full mastery program, which is basically a course bundle. You could do the same thing for a coaching program or more premium offer. Anybody who makes an actual purchase with dollars will be enrolled in this new deadline funnel, giving the contact a special price if they want to make that purchase within that time frame. But the magic here of doing this within the Course Catalyst platform is that I have visibility into the people that were offered this. So within the contact page, it's possible to display offers that have been extended to them. And I don't have that information spread out across Kajabi and deadline funnels and Kit and my CRM. I don't have to look at 40 different platforms to figure out the state of somebody. So when somebody sends me an email, they're asking about a product. A common problem I was having is I don't really know this person's history to get to the point of sending me an email. Well, now I have a full audit trail of everything that they've purchased, every offer they've been offered, and if they ended up taking those offers. That way I'm careful not to say the wrong price or offer them something that they've already purchased or re-offer something that should be expired. Now, the important thing here is these are one-time use, but they're tied to the contact. So I really wouldn't recommend re-enrolling people into the same deadline sequence. Because if they get the first one and you say, this is your only opportunity to get this discount, and then a month later they get the same sequence, they're not going to trust you. So we're going to use deadline funnels to increase trust, not remove trust. But I do recommend using deadline funnels instead of having fake timers on web pages, which is a common thing. Most people are aware when a timer is just a fake number. They can come back the next day or come back next week and the timer's still going. It's just reset. There's no true urgency there. With deadline funnels, it's different because it's tied to the contact. They can't force it to restart. So for example, if I enroll you in my Mastery upsell sequence, the only way to get that is if you use a new email and then you sign up for some paid product, you then get the upsell. So they could reproduce it with a different email and then make a purchase, but nobody's going to be going through that effort. So it gives people a true sense of urgency and scarcity that gets them to make a purchase. Last thing, with these deadline funnels being built into the platform natively, I can show you exactly when the emails will send for when someone signs up and what the timer would look like exactly at every point in that sequence. So you're not just driving blind, you actually have visibility into what the user experience is going to look like. Because if you've done any kind of funnel building, testing it and making sure everything works right and is sent at the right time can be very time consuming. I'm doing everything I can to make sure building sequences is easy, and we have validation checks to confirm you're not doing anything funky. What would be an example of something funky? Well, let's say you're running this deadline funnel to some Mastery product, but the link you're using is pointing somewhere else. A very common problem in other platforms where you might duplicate a sequence and then forget to update all of the links or miss one. That's impossible to do on Course Catalyst because we check all of the links, and since this is a built-in feature, the deadline has a goal. So if you're sending people somewhere other than the goal, that's something I can capture and say, hey, are you sending people to the right place? Are you sure about this? And beyond that, Course Catalyst will just generate the custom links for you, so you don't have to even worry about using the proper destination link. But I'm not going to get into the details of all of the system. Just wanted to give you a good overview of those different campaign types so you have an idea of when to use which. Now, I've built the entire sequence system around a timeline. And for sequences that have a clear goal in mind that is time-based, we can build around that event. So let's say we have some live event here. Maybe it's a webinar, or it's an in-person event, or whatever it might be, a sale, a product completing the launch, whatever it might be. Well, it's very common in email systems to basically think from the time they enroll and then building forward, day one, day two, whatever it might be. And you have to be careful everything lines up properly. But I wanted to change the structure so you could think about it forwards or backwards, because I logically think about it backwards. Here's what I want. I want an email to send 1 hour before the event. I want an email to send 4 hours before the event, and then a day before the event, 2 days, and so forth. You can also think about relative timing. So for example, if we have 2 days before the event, you can think of the time between these as 1 day. So the approach is a little bit different than what many people are used to, but I think it's a more intuitive approach. And additionally, we can go forward. So we can have 1 hour after the event, 1 day, and so forth. So you're no longer always having to think forward for something that makes sense to think backwards. We have something that's happening. How do we get there? Well, we build the step-by-step from the destination, the goal in mind, back to the starting point. It's the same way I do goal setting in real life. I have something I want to achieve. Instead of first thinking, where am I, and going forward from there, you think about the destination and the steps working backwards to where you are. And if you have any confusion about when an email is going to send, which I think is not going to be very common because I think the intuition here is a lot higher, there is a valid countdown timer showing that in the email for when the person would be viewing. So if you're previewing this email here, it's going to say 4 hours remaining, and it'll start counting down when you preview that. So you can look at the timer throughout any of these emails and make sure everything lines up. And it's built to avoid any kind of weird caching issues and incorrect dates that is commonly seen with some of these other platforms. And then just to go one step farther, if for any reason you're still unsure, you can just take a snapshot of the full sequence, and it's going to give you the timestamps of when every single email would send out if a person was enrolled at that moment. So you can just copy the timestamps, use that for any kind of debugging or to make sure everything is lined up right. You can use it within an LLM to check the times, make sure everything makes sense, or you can send it right to me and say, hey, does this frequency and timing look correct for this email sequence? And I'll give you the thumbs up, and then you can launch the sequence. This is basically building what I wish I had, because so many times I've been working on sequences and I'm getting lost and confused of when things are actually going to send, especially once I introduce deadline funnels, because it does get a little bit more tricky for the timings. So that was one of the big things I wanted to fix with Course Catalyst. So no longer do I have to do a bunch of test sends and checking everything. I just know it's going to work because all the timestamps are right there. Now I want to talk about exit and exclusion conditions. So if you're in a sequence, what rules exist to prevent emails being sent to you if you should not be in the sequence? And how can you leave the sequence if you don't want to be there anymore? So this is a pretty common thing you will want to do if, say, you're selling some product, and if somebody makes that purchase, you no longer want to send them marketing emails. So let's just visualize this. Here we have our sequence. I'm going to put each day going forward this way. Doesn't matter if this is a deadline, focused funnel, or a drip sequence. With all emails, we need a universal exit option. So this is an unsubscribe button. This is required. We need the ability to get people off of our list. And before I even get into all the different things here, this is a good thing. Do not think of unsubscribes as bad, because think of it like this. Let's say we have 3 people, 2 of them are happy, 1 of them are sad with your emails. So right now, our happy ratio is 2 out of 3 people. This person's regularly not opening your emails, not engaging with your links. They're not the target audience for the offer. So they're reducing your open percentage, and they're more likely to mark your content as spam. Basically, we want to get them out of the list. We want to give them a clean exit. So if we offer that to them, we now have 100% happy customers. So my belief is let anybody in, but then give them a very easy way to leave. That's because this is top of funnel stuff. We want people to come into the funnel. The funnel's purpose is to massage the people and nurture them. So we're left with 100% of our ideal customer. These are the people that end up making a purchase. So that's the purpose of a funnel. Don't try to use a funnel for what it's not for, which is gatekeeping. But that's enough on that. Basically, we need a universal button for people to leave. This is a good thing, and we want it to be visible because it will keep the quality of our sequences and our newsletter broadcasts high. If people can't find this, they'll mark it as spam. So that will remove the person from the sequence, but also your entire email list. Now, some companies or people will divide the list into different categories or different tags. So when you unsubscribe, you get a bunch of email preferences, and you can check what you're interested in, such as sales, product updates, whatever it might be. While it's possible, I just think it adds to the complexity, and I don't think fragmenting your list a bunch is going to give you better results, because I think the marketing debt and the complexity it introduces makes it more complex to improve and test than the result you get from it. So unless you have the team, the money, or the capacity to do that fragmenting, then I would just recommend having the universal unsubscribe and changing the way you do the fragmenting. So how do I do fragmenting? I fragment by sequence. So we introduce an opt-out for the sequence. And again, I make this very clear because if I am one of your contacts and I'm not interested in the sequence, but I trust you and I want to continue getting your stuff, I would like to just tell you, hey, please don't send me the rest of this sequence, but keep me in your email contact list. Send me your regular newsletters. Don't delete me from everything. That's going to get very similar results to the fragmenting, but it's way easier to organize because all we have to concern ourselves with is a single button in the sequence. And if they go through the sequence, they decide they don't want to be in the sequence, they click that button, and it stops delivering them email. This is probably possible in all platforms, but sometimes you'll have to do some rules or automation. Basically, when they click some link, remove them from the sequence. This is a native capability within Course Catalyst, so you can just have a remove from sequence button or link, and that's all it takes. So this structure is recommended. It's not enforced, but this is what I would do if I was to build a sequence. This is also going to reduce spam rates, and it's going to reduce the people that unsubscribe from all of your emails. And in a way, this gives you permission to sell a lot to your list. because if they're not interested in a sequence, they can just hit unsubscribe and go on with their day. You're not forcing them into that sequence and just continually selling something that they're not interested in. So this is a really recommended structure. I would definitely do it. Okay, now let's imagine instead of unsubscribing, they click the buy button. So they get to this email, they make the purchase. I would still cut them off. So this is basically an exclusion rule. Let's say they purchased the mastery product. The goal of the sequence is achieved. And if the goal is achieved, you remove them from receiving any of the future emails. Never have I ever received somebody who purchased a product email me and say, hey, where's the rest of my sequence? So do not worry about any of the content or stuff in these future emails that they're going to be missing out on, because that customer's long gone. They went to the product, which has way more value that's specific to what they want and need. We don't need to be bloating them with this stuff. But that could be a trigger for a new sequence for onboarding if you wish, or an upsell to an even more expensive product. So that's just one example. You can do any structure. But the idea is we need exit conditions, so we no longer send them emails in this sequence. And you should also put in this exclusion anybody who would be upset about receiving these emails. So for example, let's say I have a product over here and it's a bundle. And inside of this bundle, there are 4 products or 5 products. Let's go 5. I don't know why I did 5. It looks so bad now. And let's say these were only available through the bundle. So you start to run a sequence promoting this new individual product, but everybody who's already bought the bundle has that product. So we should put them in the exclusion so they don't get the emails and they're like, why are you selling me something I already have? Oh, by the way, could I refund the bundle and just buy this individual product I wanted? The last thing you want to do is launch some sequence and it becomes fuel for refunds. Before I did proper filtering, I had that happen a few times and it's super discouraging and just feels stupid. So avoid that if possible by using exclusions. And it is possible. You just put the rules in there and then you don't have to worry about that problem. Same idea with inactive accounts. I wouldn't put them through a bunch of sequences that are trying to sell. I'd put them through sequences to re-engage. With the proper exclusions, we can customize this sequence to sell better. So for example, we remove anybody who makes the purchase. And what that means is in these final emails, people are on the fence. They might not believe your transformation. They might have financial concerns, whatever it might be. They need pushed over the fence. So you can change the way you structure these final emails. Maybe you push to a live Q&A. Maybe you have some Q&A in the email. Maybe you focus very heavily on the refund policy here and not so much down here, basically saying there's no risk to making the purchase. Anything that would get them to make the purchase that you might not push down at the beginning of the sequence. Because the people that buy at the beginning, we don't want to be advertising to them how easy it is to get a refund, all these Q&A live calls that they can join, because they made the purchase anyways. The people that make it to the end, they're the people you want to massage further so you can do any specialized stuff there. Now, I would avoid any last minute bonuses or offers because this is kind of just like a principle. You're rewarding the wrong person. So if you're going to have any bonuses, you should incentivize on this end. You know, the first 10 people get a bonus or whatever it might be. You don't want to reward people that are wishy-washy and delaying the purchase. So do something to get them in, such as an FAQ or a live stream, but don't just give them a bunch of good free stuff because then the next time you're selling something, they're going to wait to the last minute waiting for that extra bonus. So with my selling, I always incentivized early purchases. So if you bought early access, you gained this free access to something else or whatever it might be. So all this comes back to the idea that we want to bring together the gap between email or any kind of nurturing selling content and the product. I believe a lot of platforms started with product and then they were like, oh yeah, we need to add in this email thing. And it feels very forced. So for example, I've used a course platform and I'm not going to call them out by name, but it starts with a K and ends with a Ajabi. And in that platform, they added email support, but the experience does not feel like the universal contact that Course Catalyst is providing. So throughout that entire time, even though email was available, I still used an external email provider. And then I had to build all these integrations between the two for lead magnets and tracking, and it was a nightmare. When these were disconnected, it made it difficult to write good emails that were smart and aware of the products you had without building a bunch of custom rules and integrations. That's basically the native structure within Course Catalyst, and the goal of when I designed it is to have this idea here. You have a contact, and the structure of the contact, their information, their email, is their account. I'll get into the details of that later. So it's their access, and it's the way you engage with them. So it's literally how you contact them. So you can nurture them, and they have access to all their products, and we can build more intelligent systems because of that universal idea. We don't have to split out any of this logic across multiple systems, which allows you to do specialized things that are much harder to achieve when you are using multiple systems to bring things together. So Course Catalyst is designed to have that universal contact idea, but Course Catalyst is not designed to do everything. So we're not going to try to replace every single product out there, as I do not believe that's proper selling. The specialization we bring is the heavy focus on contact, lead magnets, and email for automated selling through sequences. So this is the perfect platform for content creators and coaches. Basically, you can create a product that acts as a free lead magnet, use automation with our sequences that intelligently know the products this person has and the timing of when they join them. So we can use this as a platform to upsell into other things. And my first initial thoughts, while it could be anything, would be a call with you, a sales call, or a medium ticket item. So something in the $500 price range or a few $1,000 price range. So that's the theory behind everything and why I designed sequences the way I did. So even if you don't use Course Catalyst, I know this video was a lot about my platform. Not all of my videos are just, here's what Course Catalyst does better than everybody else. It's just hard to not talk about very true things. But even if you're on other platforms, Course Catalyst does integrate very nicely with other platforms. So it's a purely additive solution. So if you want to try out the deadline funnel system without having to use some external tool and then kind of forcing that on your current system, you can just have a separate system over here that integrates with what you have. So that was a very big priority for me, even though my ideal is let's create a very clean solution where everything is in one place. I do understand that building some systems on other platforms takes a lot of time. And switching all that over to Course Catalyst before you can even take advantage of it does not make any sense at all. So you can create stuff and build stuff separate in Course Catalyst, and that'll just integrate nicely with whatever products you have. And it's super easy to do because I will make sure that integration works for you. So those are the three main funnel types that I would say are the most common specializations with newsletters. There are other things you might see. So for example, a common one would be cart abandonment. You add something to your cart, you leave the website. But I didn't talk about every single specialization because I don't think you need to have a specialized web page builder for specific cases like that. You can just use regular automations, or if you need multiple email drip sequences. But a lot of events that are tied to some email do not need multiple emails. So you left the cart, here's a reminder. We don't need to be sending them like 5 reminders, right? It's not really a sequence. So while some of those capabilities might be important, it's not exactly the sequence structures that I wanted to talk about in this lesson. If you have a pretty good understanding of these 3 different funnel types, when you consume any marketing material online and it's talking about the different approaches to selling, you'll have a much better idea of what they are trying to accomplish and how it works. If you want to see how to create that first lead magnet and create the funnel to ultimately upsell, check out the link down below. I'll have a free intro course. And with that, I'll explain my structure, how I build trust with the customer, ultimately leading to booking a call or upselling into a product or program. So that's free. Check that out down below. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next lesson.